practical nurse. My resilience is in here. And I know there is a constant battle between your heart and your mind. Something has to overpower the other. Not saying one is right or one is wrong, but it's a choice for me, and I always choose closure. Resilience for me looks like close the end, certainty, keep moving, never quit, don't give up. And don't give up means there's got to be closure somewhere. Now, if there's an open end, like my heart would have me, why this? In my opinion about me, I can't find closure because there's an open end here. I follow my mind. My mind says this happened to you. Even if you knew why you, would it matter? Would it undo it? It would not undo it. So in order for me to endure, for me to be resilient, I have to know that there's somewhere that I'm trying to get to. And if there's an open end here, it's too much uncertainty for me. I need to know that there's a direction, there's guidance. I'm still over here with my heart wondering. And resilience for me looks like following my mind. My mind is about closure, making a statement. My heart makes questions. My mind makes statements. And follow through and even answer the questions of the heart. But either way it goes, if I do answer the questions of the heart, will it undo it? On the morning of March 21st, 2022, I went to the emergency for stomach pain. They were so severe in my right side. And it felt like labor pains, especially because they came every 5 minutes like clockwork. Then I noticed it was every 3 minutes. Got to the hospital. I was sent home with pain medicine and nausea medicine. In less than 24 hours, I returned to the hospital on March the 22nd. And in fact, when I went back on the 22nd, I have no recollection of that until I think it was April. Sometimes when I woke up out of that coma, mid-April, late April, I was in and out of a coma. It wasn't consistent because I remember waking up in between, so much. They told me later on, after I was discharged from the hospital, I learned that I was diagnosed with septic shock. Septic shock is an exacerbated form of sepsis. Usually when you go through septic shock, it's because something's gotten worse or the antibiotic has not helped. And I wish that was my case, but in my case, it was because my treatment was delayed by me being sent home. And even when, according to my medical records, when I did come back to the hospital, I laid there for 3 to 4 days without even being touched before I was transferred to another hospital. And by the time my stomach blew up, I looked like I was 8 months pregnant. And I only know this because I found some images in my phone. I didn't even remember taking the selfie. But my family had shared with me that my stomach was so big. But that's when the concern happened, and only then when concern happened. And they had to do an emergency surgery, exploratory surgery. And by the time they opened me up, there was so much dead tissue in me because oxygen was cut off from my vital organs and from my extremities, especially due to vasopressins. Vasopressins is like an adrenaline. When your blood pressure drops, my blood pressure plummeted 50-ish over 19. I'm dying. So that medicine brings your blood pressure back up, brings it up high. But by that time, there's dead tissue in me. Blood vessels to certain parts of my body, parts of my organs were dead. The doctor told me that he had to cut off so much of my feet of intestines out of my stomach. And told me, they didn't tell me right away, but I do remember waking up and saying my hands were black. I'm strapped to a bed. Have no idea what's going on. Why am I strapped? Because they didn't really give me clarity in the beginning. But I remember the day I was in and out of a coma this day. And I know when I was going in, but the doctor said he needed to meet with my family. And I said, don't meet with my family about me without me anymore. I'm a nurse. And he said, okay. That night he came back and he said, my family surrounded my bed. And I guess he had already shared with them. And he said, I have something to tell you, sweetheart. And he said, your hands are going to have to be amputated. And I cried the ugliest cry ever. I cried the most. And I knew that, like right now, as I revisit those moments, I knew those hands had to come off. But for some reason, I didn't know that. And for some reason in that bed, I kept saying, I didn't want to fix this. But that was the medication I was under. And they better had me under medication after saying something like that. Because if I was in my right mind, maybe that's, well, I know that was why they had me strapped down. Because they said I was very aggressive. But I don't know what's going on. So anyway, after the doctor shared that with me, I'm looking at my feet just as dark as my hand. And I said, hey, Doc, what about my feet? And he looked at me plain as day and he said, I don't know yet. He left. He came back the next day and he said, sweetheart, I have something to tell you that I not have the guts to tell you on yesterday. Your feet are going to have to be amputated. And I prayed to wake up out of that nightmare. Financially, this changed my life so much. I had to get on disability. My disability income is very limited. And you know what's so sad? That I'm a quadruple amputee and I had to fight for the disability. It almost took a year for me to get it. And it's still not enough. The sad part is that every place of employment that I had, they never asked me about deductions with Social Security, but there was a fight for me to get even what I paid into it. I've had disconnection notice, things that I've never had before. My credit plummeted. I've lost about 12 insurance policies. And I'd like to say that they didn't care. The companies probably didn't care because, you know, it's my problem. But the people I spoke to, I mean, I guess they were compassionate, but financially, I've been in foreclosure for my house twice. I can say this though. I still manage. I thank God I'm secured. I can't do anything that I want, but I don't complain either. But my finances are so different. Even after writing the book, some months I sell 2 books, some months I sell 200 books, some months I sell 40 books. So it's up and down. I'm often concerned with my future. Socially, my life has changed. Not too much, but not too much. I've never had a lot of friends, but I've never had one enemy. I've never met one enemy, never. And when I say a lot of friends, I've only dealt with maybe 4 or 5 people my entire life. Those 4 or 5 people are no longer. This whole incident with me was so eye-opening because, like, even in my book, I wrote something about people who weren't there for me. But I also revisit moments like those people can't be there for themselves, had never been there for themselves. I was always the battery. that charged myself. And I realized I think I had expectations on people that I shouldn't have had or didn't have for themselves. And other than that, I've kind of been introverted, and I like it like that. I'm so at peace. There's nothing I miss. But, I'm human. When this happened, I think that I wanted somebody there. I needed emotional support. I didn't need financial support from the people who I expected emotional support from. Financial would have been bonus, would have been lanyard. But I needed emotional support. Some of me was missing. Not just a piece. Whole body. My whole body changed. I didn't have a broken arm or a broken leg. I lost limbs. I lost hands. I lost feet. I was in the hospital in a coma for 2 months. And I've seen a few people here and there. But when you go to a funeral and they say, the morning starts after the funeral. When I made it home, I didn't see much of anybody except my immediate family. They were there. They took care of my physiological needs, but my psychological needs, they weren't met. My family can't do that. The people who you vent to and talk to, they can't do that. I can say some things, but they don't get it the way the other people should have gotten it. But again, I thank God for this experience too, because without this, I would have never saw that. I would have never saw that. And you look for a you in somebody else. And because I wasn't, you expect people to do what you would do. And I would have never noticed that if this wouldn't have happened, or I wouldn't have noticed it right now if this wouldn't have happened. This changed me spiritually so much. As I said, I've always been a God-fearer and a believer. But my discernment is at a higher level. I believe everything God tells and shows me. My discernment does not need confirmation. My discernment is so exact. In fact, it's so exact, I'll tell it's almost unreal. Just recently, I called someone who I felt energy was different, or I just did it anyway. And they said, we talked for a few minutes, and they said, I'll call you right back. And they never called back. And this is somebody who I used to talk to every day, who I was kind of close with. And they said, I'll call you right back. So I revisited a moment, like after I wrote my book, they started acting that way. And the phrase, just grow and they'll fall off. After I wrote that book, the few people that I still remain talking to every now and then, they fell off. Just recently, someone told me, that's because your progress is exposing what they're not doing. But my discernment told me, like, they don't want to be bothered. They don't want to talk. But I should have listened and followed my directions. But it was so to the point, and I just had to address it, or just make sure. But I had already discerned that. And I think my discernment is at a level of exact to me. Do you want to move past this, or do you want to live in this? Do you want to be empowered by this, or do you want to be pitted by this? You can make the best out of your situation, or it can take the best out of you. You have to, if you want closure for a challenge, or if you want a solution, you have to be positive and keep an open mind as far as the glass half full. They used to have empty too, but you have to, it depends on You know, as a kid, I used to watch cartoons, and every cartoon, I use Tom and Jerry for an example. When Tom is chasing Jerry and he wants to do something bad, on one shoulder, you have a devil character, and on the other shoulder, you have the angel character. So I gotta say this, I look at that image so different now. I don't just see that there's a good way and a bad way. There's a left, there's a right, there's a up, and there's a down. You know what I see? I see you have a choice. That's what I see. So when you face a challenge, you have to choose, what do you want out of that challenge? Do you want pity? Do you want empowerment? You know, like with my challenge, this is what I feel about myself. Even though I'm giving advice to somebody else, I see myself, and I want others to see me as the epitome of empowerment from my challenge. Not pity, not sympathy. Compassion, maybe, maybe not. You know, that depends on the individual. I take it if you have it, and if not, that's fine too. But definitely not pity. But that's me. But it depends on what do you want or what do you expect. Because if you have a challenge, if it's solvable, solve it. If it's not, figure it out. Figure out the way to make the best out of it. I can't solve mine. So I figure a way to make it. I want to make an impact.